Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Today we have a special guest. As you know, what's happening in Texas, what's happening all over the country, not only with insurgents, not only with all these different issues, but also with an issue dear to the hearts of many women. Today we're lucky to have Julie A. Burkhart, founder and CEO of Trust Women. She's a former advisor to Dr. Tiller. Yes, that Dr. Tiller, and has led the fight for choice in legislatures, courtrooms, and at front lines of reproductive justice has been at the front line of reproductive justice for the last 3 decades. Julie Burkhart, welcome to Politics Done Right. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, Egberto. It's really nice to be here. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. But, before we get into talking about the the organization that you're in, let's talk a little bit about what's happening in this country. We have turned into a pretty darn violent country, wouldn't you say? Or maybe we have always been. What's the case?
Well, I would say yes, and yes, and yes, that we have always had violence in this country. Some of it, I would say, has been less visible, or people haven't paid attention to certain violence in this country. And then most certainly, over the past several years, violence has risen in this country. And especially, I was just recently reading a Wall Street Journal article. I believe it was the Wall Street Journal that was talking about the rise of violence and what we've seen in this country, especially since President Barack Obama was elected, and then subsequently Donald Trump coming into office.
Yeah, Donald Trump kind of really pushed a lot of buttons. He always talked about he was able to get to the bad part of the carnality of humans because he was able to bring out all the things that people were scared of or the misinformed. He was just good at that. Now, one of the issues is that right now we have a lot of this violence coming from the right side, and it so happened that the right side has a lot of issues with women. It has a lot of issues with colorization, race. It has a lot of these other issues. How has that impacted you in your life proper?
Well, I can say in recent years, and well, there have been a couple of incidents that have just been chilling. One was the very night that Donald Trump was elected. Our clinic in Wichita, Kansas was vandalized and someone actually broke in. And this was a person who identifies as anti-choice. And that was just not a great way to begin knowing that we were going to have this right-wing president coming in to the White House. It was chilling at best. Also, just recently, we had a gentleman show up at our clinic in Oklahoma City, and that's where we have our 2 clinics. He showed up at our Oklahoma City clinic with an automatic rifle, a pistol, and knives strapped to his body. And that was chilling as well. I was scared to death for the staff, our patients coming in and out, and of course, we had to involve law enforcement in that.
Now, was he on the public portion, on the sidewalks or something, meaning not on your property?
Yes, he was in the public right of way, but he was his his body, and then his messaging was aimed towards people who were on our property and at the clinic.
I don't want to get into the guns issue here, but don't you find it ironic that rightfully based on the laws, I imagine in Oklahoma, likewise the laws here in Texas and many other red states, these guys have all the rights to load themselves up with guns and stand right in front of your place, becoming a menace legally. What do you think about that?
Well, absolutely, because when we called the police, he was open carrying and he was well within his rights, even though his intent was to put the fear of God in those of us at the clinic, who, patients and staff alike. There was no positivity in his presence at our facility. It was only that to harass and intimidate. And also, we don't know who is going to be trigger happy and decide right now, this very day, at this very moment in time, I'm going to pull this trigger, and I'm going to shoot these people. And so we had a lot of scared folks at
It
the
is
clinic.
amazing because a lot of times people would say, well, guns don't kill people. People do. But it's interesting that people in countries where there are not a lot of guns, meaning a lot of people don't have access to use the guns at their whims, a hell of a lot less people die, right?
Correct. Right. A lot fewer people died. Right. And right, this is, I guess, getting into the gun issue, but how many people in this country every year are, killed by, by gun violence.
Yeah,
And
well,
yeah.
let's talk a little bit about your past experience with Dr. George Tiller. Tell us a little bit about your feelings there.
Oh, well, I will say that I miss him every day. He was just one of the best people I've ever worked with. As you can tell, I have a sign on my wall there, that he actually gave me, that was hanging on his wall at one point when I worked for him. He, his spirit was one of compassion and giving the best medical care to people that he could. And, one thing that he would just say very simply is that, people need a little help every now and then. And he felt that his job was to give people that help. I would also say that this, the abortion field for him was something that came calling for him. He did not go looking for that. Um, just the way that that evolved in his life. He was actually going to be a dermatologist, if you can imagine that.
Amazing, yeah.
Which is, a little more low key than being an abortion provider. But because of the way things worked out in his family, and then patients coming and calling, asking him, that's the way his life worked out, that professional path. Um, he believed that, well, he would always say, I'm a woman educated physician, and women are able to make difficult, complex decisions for themselves and come to reasonable conclusions. And so he looked at himself more as a facilitator. um,
I find it amazing that for the people that there are a lot of people that, first of all, let me ask it this way. A lot of people frowned on abortions. Um, why shouldn't they frown on abortions? Give an explanation to those people who frown on the practice and why they shouldn't.
well, I would say one reason is that you never know how your life is going to unfold. Um, and so here, there are a couple of examples. Um, in talking with people, who would identify as, say, Republican, maybe more to the right, people who would say, I'm pro-life, I'm anti-choice, I don't believe in abortion. Well, if you dig deeper sometimes into those conversations, you find that those people actually have been faced with having to make that decision. Just recently, in talking, with some gentlemen who, their partners had had abortions. One definitely was, there was a fetal abnormality and their baby was not going to survive. I forget what the other reason was, but those are two prime examples of, you just never know. You never know how life is going to unfold. And so therefore, we need to leave that right up to each individual in consultation with their family, friends, medical professionals, if they wish, to make these decisions for themselves.
Now, for those who have the issue that is a life. Now, let me tell you, my personal opinion is that I am personally too dumb to know where life begins unless a baby is born. That's my honest opinion. And my second opinion is that I can't have a kid. It's presumptuous of me as a man to
Mhm.
really tell a woman who has, I don't want to call it a burden, but who has that responsibility to try to dictate what she's going to do. Not only that, as a political activist, I understand that given that I can't have kids and women can, and that everything in this economy has some sort of a financial repercussion for which a government doesn't really give the kind of aid that it should. It definitely should be a woman's choice. Now, first, let me know how do you handle the part? Is it a life or it is not a life? And secondly, from an economic standpoint.
Well, and I think that that's where, like you were saying, we all have our very different opinions about when life begins, or what that life means. And so that's yet just another reason why people should be left to make these decisions in private, with the people that they want to surround themselves with. That can be based on just your own personal feeling. It could be based on your religious background, your spirituality. Um, that's tricky, and that's where definitely when women are coming in and we're doing our consultations, which some people call counseling, with them and talking, some people have this question, but that is a question for them to answer that we could not answer for them, because abortion is so personal and private. We can't make that decision. And then, yes, from an economic standpoint, if someone's wanting to, say, finish their college career, and taking care of a child or another child, that could put too much of a strain on them in the moment to be able to finish that career in college, to be able to advance, to then provide a better life for their children, subsequent children. We have a very patchwork childcare system where it's challenging if you have a baby or a toddler or a small child, to be able to afford to put them in that daycare or childcare center. So there are a lot of considerations that go into women's decision making. And also what I want to say is, in this part of the country where we have our clinics, 70% of the people who come and see us for abortion care, 70% are already parents. And so oftentimes what we hear is, those folks will say, I'm just trying to make a good decision for the children that I already have and that I love dearly, and I want them to have a good life.
Yeah, it is amazing because I mean, when you talk about the patchwork of, we have problems in Congress getting laws passed for good child care. We have people want to get to work, they need child care. We don't offer that. But even most importantly, what we find is that we somehow want to control women as far as whether they should or not carry a child. But after that child is born, the policies that are necessary to support that child to make sure they live, many times it's not there and they die, isn't it? I mean, so there are a lot of things to look in that regards. Okay, tell us a little bit about Trust Women.
Yeah, I would love to. So I founded Trust Women in July of 2009, just a few short weeks after, as you had referenced, my former boss and mentor, Dr. George Tiller, had been assassinated. I fortunately had some just wonderful friends and family and colleagues coming to me and saying, okay, what are we going to do now? How are we going to bounce back from this? Not that you can, I believe, ever fully bounce back from a tragic death like that, but how are we going to fill this space so that we don't give these right-wing extremists the final say? You know, we're not going to sit down and shut up because they took our very beloved, this very beloved person away from us. So Trust Women was born out of that. And it took about a year to really figure out the mission and vision of the organization. So I really, and I've done more political and legislative work in my career, and that's what I did for Dr. Tiller. But it became very apparent that if we also don't have points of access and we're not providing services in areas that are underserved, then we can elect all the, you know, wonderful legislators out there that we are able to and pass all the bills we want. But we need also the facilities and the ability for people to also access that care. So we went about starting up the clinic again, and we are in Dr. Tiller's former clinic in Wichita.
Or Kansas, right?
Yes, in Wichita, Kansas, which I just feel just really blessed and happy every day that we were able to make that work.
Is that the only location in Kansas? That's
No,
it. Okay.
there are two clinics in Kansas City that provide services, and then we also have a Planned Parenthood in Wichita, but Trust Women in this part of the state is the only medical and surgical abortion provider. So we're the only medical and surgical facility outside of Kansas City.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you are in Oklahoma City,
And in
another state with a lot of restrictions.
Yes. And there there are also 3 other providers in the state, but we're the only provider that goes up to the legal limit, which is 21.6 weeks gestation.
Hmm.
So we see a lot of Texas patients as well.
I can imagine. Now, what are the states with the most severe restrictions as you recall right now?
Oh, goodness. Well, Mississippi, Oklahoma, um, Arkansas, Louisiana,
Texas.
Missouri, Texas.
I'm in
let's
Texas.
let's not leave Texas off. We're actually waiting for a decision to come down from the circuit court in Texas. So I guess, for example, I was looking at a New York Times article on abortion access. It was several months ago now, but basically it came straight down the middle of the country through the Midwest and all through the Southeast. And those are the states represented that are incredibly regulated with punitive anti-choice laws.
Uh, that is sad because that has an impact, and people in red states look for abortion too, and we know that if it's not there legally, women are gonna do what women have to do to get their lives together, and those who are incapable of doing it, we've almost sentenced them to many times to economic disaster. Your point, your thoughts?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And that if we are not giving people that ability to control their own fertility and make those own decisions and choices for their lives, it's a sentence of, taking matters into their own hands, which might not be safe. Also, more poverty. The University of California, San Francisco, in one of their departments, they've recently, well, it's not recent, but they've done a turnaway study and just looking at the outcomes for women who have been turned away from abortion services. And so those findings are not positive for people who are not able to access those services. So it's the turnaway study, if anybody wanted to look that up.
Now, Juliet, we're coming close to the end, and what I always do with my programs is because I know I definitely don't have all the questions or the answers for that matter. I ask you to tell me anything you want to tell me that I should have asked, but that you want to get out there.
Well, I guess going back to our original, or what we first talked about in terms of violence in America, and that rising tide of violence. We in the abortion world have faced violence for a long time, as I know other segments and groups of
People have.
people have in this country. And the thing that's really important is that, and of course, we are just coming off a presidency where he was all about gaslighting and encouraging this violence. But when we see these extremist groups, no matter who their hatred is targeted towards, feeding lies, the disinformation through social media, that is, giving that permission and feeding those false beliefs, that is damaging. So I wish people could just really see that, just just how damaging. And I'm sorry, I'm not being very articulate on this here,
I
but
understand. I think everybody understands exactly what you're saying.
okay, yes. And it's and just what just what I or Dr. Tiller had experienced, bombings, flooding, windows shot out, knocked out, and then his ultimate assassination. And what good does that really do for us collectively as a country and a people? And so it's sad, and to be driven by such fear.
It is in fact sad. Well, Julie Burkhart, founder and CEO of Trust Women, thank you for what you do, and thank you for how you stand up to all the negative, because we do need you. So you have a wonderful day, and thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Oh, this has been a pleasure, and thank you. Thank you so much.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.